Kenzuki's Kingdom, Chapter 6, Part 2. Michael has just been trying to build a fire out of sight from Kenzuki on the other side of his hill that can only be seen from the sea. There's been a huge storm, which has unfortunately absolutely soaked his, what he calls a beacon, his huge bonfire, so he's having to wait for it to dry out. The air was hot and heavy all that day. It was difficult to move at all, difficult to breathe. Stella could only lie and pant. The only place to cool off was the sea, so I spent most of that day lolling lazily in the water, throwing the occasional stick for Stella to keep her happy. I was lying in the sea, just floating there and daydreaming, when I heard the old man's voice. He was hurrying down the beach, yelling at us as he came and waving his stick wildly in the air. "Yamero! Abunai! Dangerous! Understand? No swim!" He did not seem to be angry with me as he had been before, but he was clearly upset about something. I looked around me. The sea was still heaving in, but gently now, breathing out the last of the storm, the waves falling limp and exhausted on the beach. I could see no particular danger. "Why not?" I called back. "What's the matter?" He had dropped his stick on the beach and was wading out through the surf towards me. "No swim! Dameda! Abunai! No swim!" Then he had me by the arm and was leading me forcibly out of the sea. His grip was vice-like. There was little point in struggling. Only when we were back on the beach did he at last release me. He stood there breathless for a few moments. "Dangerous. Very bad. Abunai." He was pointing out to sea. "No swim. Very bad. No swim. You understand?" He looked me hard in the eye, leaving me in no doubt that this was not meant as advice. This was a command that I should obey. Then he turned and walked off into the forest, retrieving his stick as he went. Stella ran after him, but I called her back. I felt at that moment like defying him openly. I would charge back into the sea and frolic as noisily, as provocatively as I could. That would show him. I was bristling at the outrageous unfairness of it all. First he would not let me light my fire. Then I was banished to one end of the island, and now I wasn't even allowed to swim. I wanted to call him every name I could think of, but I didn't. I didn't go swimming in the sea again either. I capitulated. I gave in, because I had to. I needed his food, his water. Until my secret beacon of wood dried out, until the next ship came by, I would have to do as he said. I had no choice. I did make a man-sized sculpture of him lying in the sand outside my cave, and I did jump up and down on him in fury and frustration. It made me feel a little better, but not much. Until now, except for occasional gut-wrenching pangs of homesickness and loneliness, I had by and large managed to keep my spirits up. But not any more. My beacon stayed obstinately damp. Every day I went up to Watch Hill hoping to sight a ship, and every day the sea stretched away on all sides, empty. I felt more and more isolated, more and more wretched. In the end, I decided not to go up onto Watch Hill any more. That it was just not worth it. Instead, I stayed in my cave and curled up on my sleeping mat for long hours of the day. I lay there, drowning in my misery, thinking of nothing but the hopelessness of it all, how I would never get off this island, and how I would die here, and my mother and father would never even know what had happened to me. No one would, except the old man, the madman, my captor, my persecutor. The weather stayed heavy and humid. How I longed to plunge into the ocean, but I dared not. He'd be watching me for sure. With every day that passed, in spite of the fish and fruit and water he continued to bring me, I came to hate the old man more and more. Dejected and depressed I may have been, but I was angry too. And gradually this anger fueled in me a new determination to escape, and this determination revived my spirits. Once again I went on my daily trek up to Watch Hill. I began to collect a fresh cachet of dry leaves and twigs from the forest edge and squirreled them away in the deep cleft in the rock so that I would always be sure they were dry when the time came. My beacon had dried out at last. I built it up higher and higher. When I'd done all I could, I sat and waited for the time to come, as I knew it must. Day after day, week after week, I sat up on Watch Hill, my fire-glass polished in my pocket, my beacon ready and waiting. As it turned out, when the time did come, I wasn't up on Watch Hill at all. One morning, with sleep still in my head, I emerged from my cave, and there it was. A boat with strange red-brown sails. I supposed it to be some kind of Chinese junk, and not that far out to sea either. Just so you're aware, junk is a homophone. It has two meanings. Junk as in rubbish, but junk can also mean a type of ship. So if you want to Google what a Chinese junk looks like, or you could look back at the beginning of the chapter, it's a type of Chinese-looking boat. And it was not that far out to sea either. Excitement got the better of me. I ran helter-skelter down the beach, shouting and screaming for all I was worth. But I could see at once that it was hopeless. The junk was not that far out to sea, but it was still far too far for me to either be seen or heard. I tried to calm myself, tried to think. The fire, light the fire. I ran all the way up Watch Hill without once stopping, Stella hard on my heels and barking. All around me the forest was crackling and screeching and whooping in protest at this sudden disturbance. I readied my cachet of dried leaves, took my fire-glass and crouched down beside the beacon to light my fire. But I was trembling with so much excitement and exhaustion by now that I could not hold my hands still enough. So I set up a frame of twigs and laid the glass over it just as I had before. Then I sat over it, willing the leaves to smoulder. Every time I looked out to sea, the junk was still there, moving slowly away, but still there. It seemed an age, but there was a wisp of smoke, and shortly afterwards a glorious, wondrous glow of flame spreading along the edge of one leaf. I bent over it to blow it into life. That was when I saw his feet. I looked up. The old man was standing over me, his eyes full of rage and hurt. He said not a word, but set about stamping out my embryo fire. He snatched up my fire-glass and hurled it at the rock below, where it shattered into pieces. I could only look on and weep as he kicked away my precious pile of dry leaves, as he dismantled my beacon and hurled the sticks and branches one by one down the hill. As he did so, the group of orangutans gathered to watch. Soon, nothing whatsoever now remained of my beacon. All about me now, the rocky scree was littered with the scattered ruins of it. I expected him to screech at me, but he didn't. He spoke very quietly, very deliberately. "Damida," he said. "But why?" I cried. "I want to go home. There's a boat, can't you see? I just want to go home, that's all. Why won't you let me? Why?" He stood and stared at me. For a moment I thought I detected just a flicker of understanding. Then he bowed very stiffly from the waist and said, "Gomenasai. Gomenasai. Sorry. Very sorry." And with that he left me there and went off back into the forest, followed by the orangutans. I sat there watching the junk until it was nothing but a spot on the horizon, until I could not bear to watch any more. By this time I had already decided how I could best defy him. I was so enraged that consequences didn't matter to me now, not any more. With Stella beside me, I headed along the beach, stopped at the boundary line in the sand, and then very deliberately I stepped over it. As I did so, I let him know precisely what I was doing. "Are you watching, old man?" I shouted. "Look, I've crossed over your silly line, and now I'm going to swim. I don't care what you say. I don't care if you don't feed me. You hear me, old man?" Then I turned and charged down the beach into the sea. I swam furiously until I was completely exhausted and a long way from the shore. I trod water and thrashed the sea in my fury, making it boil and froth all around me. "It's my sea as much as yours," I cried, "and I'll swim in it when I like." I saw him then. He appeared suddenly at the edge of the forest. He was shouting something at me, waving his stick. That was the moment I felt it. A searing, stinging pain in the back of my neck, then my back, and my arms too. A large, translucent white jellyfish was floating right beside me, its tentacles groping at me. I tried to swim away, but it came after me, hunting me. I was stung again, in my foot this time. The agony was immediate and excruciating. It permeated my entire body like one continuous electric shock. I felt my muscles going rigid. I kicked for the shore, but I could not do it. My legs seemed paralysed, my arms too. I was sinking, and there was nothing I could do about it. I saw the jellyfish poised for the kill above me. I screamed, and my mouth filled with water. I was choking. I was going to die. I was going to drown, but I did not care. I just wanted the pain to stop. Death, I knew, would stop it. That's the end of the chapter, and that's where we're going to stop for today.